So I will just wait a couple of minutes for people to gather, and then we'll start briefly. I'll suggest that we wait just another minute, and then we'll kick it off. Okay, so good afternoon, everyone in Europe, and good morning to anyone that might be tuning in from the other side of the Atlantic, from the US. We had a couple of registrations from there. It is my pleasure to welcome you to this policy roundtable that the Center for the Study of Democracy and its partners are organizing on the occasion of the presentation of a new anti-corruption tool and the final event under our SceMaps project funded by DG Home. We have been working in the past 2.5 years to deliver what you will be seeing today from my colleagues. And it is my great pleasure that today we also have a representative from DG Home and also Mr. Ramona Strugario, member of the European Parliament, who will also give us a little bit of a policy overview. Allow me to start with a few housekeeping rules. This is on the record and a recorded session. So if you don't want to be recorded, please take note of that. My colleagues will put the rules of engagement, so to say, in the chat box that you could see below. And we ask you to please be active and go ahead and ask questions in the Q&A box that you also see on your horizontal bar. If you want to raise your hand too, so that you want to participate in discussions, please do so. We will have 2 opportunities for discussion because Ms. Strugario will have to leave us in an hour. If you have specific questions to her or to any of the opening remarks, please make sure that you ask them in the first half an hour so that we could round up and do these questions. And then I will transfer to my colleague, Laura Stefan, who will be moderating the panel with the presentations of 3 of my distinguished colleagues. Now, let me start by saying that we're doing this, and I have to say, in a very different, I will just very briefly outline 3 points. One is the different policy environment in which we started the project and which we ended. The second one is I want to give an overview of this is a part of continuing efforts on the part of CSD and our partners. And the third, I want to highlight some specific achievements that we think are important based on this report. First of all, let me say that when we started this in 2019, we were in a very different world. And I have to say that now anti-corruption seems to be where we always wanted it to be and where we always wanted it to see. And it's part of a growing concern about democracy in the world and about democracy versus authoritarianism. And it's actually part of the idea that in order to safeguard our democracies, we need to make sure that we do not allow our governance gaps to be exploited, in particular ones related to corruption. And as you know, this year will be the first that will mark the UN special session on anti-corruption. That will be in June. The US overhauled significantly its commitment to democracy and anti-corruption, and I hope that we're going to see more and more such commitments. The EU, the new Europe, well, can't say it's already new, but the new Commission also considerably stepped up its effort, adding to the New Democracy Action Plan, the first rule of law report, as you saw, the continuation of the work of the anti-corruption report, in which we were all actors, from already 6 years or 7 years ago, some of us. So I think we are moving in a really fast pace where we see a lot of opening of data. We see a lot of focus on corporate transparency. We saw that the global Magnitsky-style acts are also developing. I think Europe needs to follow up and not just focus on human rights, but also on anti-corruption. So add this as at least in part for its internal affairs. And of course, I think it is high time, and this is also noted by DG Home, that we upgrade and update our anti-corruption policies and instruments. And I hope that today's discussion and today's presentation by my colleagues, which will mark the presentation of our outputs of our SceMaps tools, will add to these practical instruments that will help us gain from this new policy momentum. I mean, help out that these new policy initiatives are actually realized on the ground. Let me say that today we are really celebrating a almost more than a decade of work on tackling state capture as the most pernicious form of corruption, as the one that is not really that visible, as the one where we have integrated within our laws and our procedures and regulations. And when we first started, and I want to here to thank specifically DG Home for their commitment to this area and to working with us on that. When we first started, we were just looking at national level, just looking at Eastern Europe, and then we discovered and stumbled upon the issue of sectoral, particularly highly regulated sectoral issues with state capture vulnerabilities. And this is what SceMaps is all about. We're trying to propose an instrument that looks at those sectors and that discovers risk profiles, where risks might be high, in particular in relation to public procurement and corporate ownership. I think what the innovation of this project is that it links corporate or capital ownership with public procurement and also with some media instruments that we hope we will continue developing as, of course, the availability of data increases. But it also steps up. I mean, we are standing on the shoulders of giants because a lot of people before us had done a lot of work in that domain. And we're also using one of our excellent anti-corruption policy instruments called MACP, Monitoring Anti-Corruption Policy Implementation, which I want to laud all the public institutions that worked with us in the past 2 years, and there were 8 of them in 4 countries, Bulgaria, Romania, Czech Republic, and Italy, Spain and Italy, sorry, where we managed to work, despite the pandemics, to work with 8 institutions to scan their anti-corruption policies and instruments and to hopefully allow them to improve their anti-corruption performance. And this is going to be one of the really great outputs of our projects, where these institutions will actually work with us, or they work with us to actually improve their internal anti-corruption management. But more than that, we will actually, based on their inputs, we are able to fine-tune our big data instrument, which my colleagues are going to present later on. With that, let me again thank all our presenters today. Let me also say big thank you to all our partners who did a great job working through the pandemics. I mean, it was really, really difficult at some points. And also let us thank again DG Home for their flexibility, but also for helping us out in this difficult time for us, so that we carried this project to excellence again. And with that, I would like to turn the floor to Dr. Anita Hipper, who is a team leader on anti-corruption from Directorate General Migration and Home Affairs of the European Commission. Anita, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ruslan. It is a pleasure to be here with you and with the distinguished panelists, and I'm very happy to see quite familiar faces. And when I listened carefully to your presentation, I must say I'm quite motivated because we're so focused always on what is not working, and we're looking always at the deficiencies, we're looking for ways to improve. So I'm very happy that we can make a difference with the targeted support, through the project you carried out and through the initiatives on improved methodology and instruments to track down both state capture and corruption. And I also must confess, indeed, it is a very sensitive area because, as you said, you cannot pinpoint it so easily. We have seen in not only in third countries, in the European Union, in consolidated democracies, that we have elected leaders through democratic means that tend to go towards paths that are considered illegal, where a lot of concerns are brought by the European Parliament, by the civil society. We have seen protests at large through a number of member states in view of that. And I'm also happy that from the Commission side, from the Union side, there is a reinforced support, and that corruption is brought up where it has to be, with a degree of ambition that, of course, it still needs to be continued. And I know the European Parliament has called multiple times on a strengthened instrument on rule of law, and I'm happy that Ramona Strugariu is here today with us, and I'm sure she will expand more into that, because indeed state capture corruption is a central part of the modus operandi also of organized crime groups. They make up around 60% of the criminal networks that are active in the European Union. So we need to pay a close attention to corruption, state capture, the political and institutional setup, but also the synergies that we see with organized crime, with the multiple forms that it takes through infiltration also in state bodies. And we have seen quite some famous cases, like the Encrochat case has shown in the Netherlands, where organized crime has penetrated also law enforcement, how big this damage is as such. And as you said, at the European Union level, quite important progress has been made throughout the last years. Legislation has been passed on anti-money laundering, public procurement, whistleblower protection and asset recovery. And also the first EU-wide rule of law report highlights the fight against corruption as a fundamental pillar. And we look at the corruption having an impact also on the business environment. This is why all member states, through the recovery and resilience plans, need to submit plans that take into account also these elements. And of course, we have a new European public prosecutor office with a mandate to investigate and prosecute and bring to judgment crimes against the EU budget. So this is an area where we'll also be looking into, also in view of the current context and the current pandemic. And in fact, the COVID angle will be also looked into the rule of law report in this year's edition. So we had the first rule of law report adopted last year on the 30th of September. We're now currently in the process of working with member states, but also civil society and international stakeholders on preparing the second rule of law report, which is due for adoption mid-July. And here indeed, we'll also look at how the pandemic has provided potential risks and vulnerabilities to the institutional infrastructure and also to the funds from this point. And I'm also happy you have mentioned the international arena. Indeed, this is quite important to join the efforts also at the global level, because the EU will participate and will be represented for the first time in the very first special session of the UN General Assembly, which is planned, as you said, for the 2nd and the 4th of June. And here, in this context, a quite historical event as such will happen. The EU will also launch as the first and unique regional organization its review under UNCAC, under the UN Convention against Corruption. So this is quite something we will be working on. And with that point, making also the link to the synergies, I'll also want to draw the attention to the organized crime strategy that the Commission has recently adopted, and where the cooperation, the exchange of information, but also the gathering of that data and indicators that go in the direction of your work has been highlighted, and also the anti-corruption as a special section has been highlighted in this regard. So to sum up, I'm very happy to be here to continue our discussion. It is a continued dialogue because we have seen challenges throughout, and also the second rule of law report edition will show this in an objective manner throughout the European Union, that there are everywhere ways to improve and needs to improve our systems in order to be as resilient as they could be. So that will be all from my side. With a big thank you to the organizers for the high quality project and the valuable work.
Thank you, Anita, again. I mean, it's really we were discussing with colleagues that it seems that we touched all the bases, you know, when one way or another, when we were looking at the new strategy of countering organized crime, or the OCTA report by Europol. And actually, we were thinking how important that is, that what we were doing is adding another layer of vulnerability or risk assessment. And I hope that this will show in the presentations of my colleagues, which shows how important it is to look at certain sectors, which we found 5 years ago to be problematic. And one of them was healthcare, pharmaceuticals in particular. So this is particularly important in the current situation. But also it was this is precisely where the infiltration of the legitimate economy by organized crime happens, you know, through, and this is where our tool could help out a lot, you know, not to be seen necessarily as, you know, this is a sector where you have state capture, you know, but to be seen as you have a vulnerability, you know, where you might have, you know, some, as we say, wolves in sheep's clothes, you know, where, you know, they enter the legitimate economy. And with that, allow me to turn to Ramona Strugario, member of the European Parliament from the Renew Europe group, and also member of the Committee of Civil Liberties and Justice and Home Affairs, and the Anti-Corruption Intergroup, which is something new and welcome on our part, the civil society. And we very much look forward to European Parliament's initiatives and leadership in that domain. Ms. Strugario, again, it's the second time you join us in our events, and we're very much thankful to the Intergroup for supporting our work, and we'll look forward to working with you. The floor is yours, please.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the nice words and the presentation. It is always an honor to be part of your events, because when politicians join the voice of the experts in asking for more action and for areas of improvement, then we know that we are backed up by sound work and sound evidence of true efforts being made in that direction, and such is the case of the anti-corruption effort. I truly want to congratulate you for your work as well, and perhaps as a conclusion of this presentation, we could discuss what you intend to do with it and whether the Commission intends to use it in screening, monitoring, assessing risks and so on, because I think it is a very valuable tool, and these are very valuable tools that should be used, expanded, you know, if we discuss policies of scale, and why not even include it to some point in the way that the monitoring on rule of law is done. Now, to referring to the policy options that we have for improving the rule of law mechanism, in Europe, the reality is that for a long number of years, we did not have very strong tools, I would say, to properly do that. Well, we, as a matter of fact, now in this MFF and with this multi-annual financial framework, are first setting up a mechanism, conditionality mechanism, establishing that money coming from the EU budget can be held back in case we have generalized deficiencies or we have issues with the sound management of the EU budget through rule of law breaches. But cases of dismantling the rule of law, we've witnessed at least from 2010 when Viktor Orban started to do this, and it was rather unobserved. Then he continued to do it. Then we had Poland under PiS, other member states with a quite rapid development. Romania, Bulgaria are part of these member states, and with leaders pursuing different attacks, either on the independence of the judiciary or on the free press. We have seen it during the pandemics more than ever, I believe, and with attacks, strong attacks to civil societies as well. As the Union did not have any strong mechanisms, rapid mechanisms, or actual sanctions to pursue, I believe that these leaders started to ignore the signals coming from the Union. This is what happened, as a matter of fact, because if we look at all of these instruments that we have, they are monitoring, they are making recommendations. There are statements of concern, but literally, what we have with an effect and with a compulsory effect are two things. The first thing is the infringement procedure, which is functioning and which has had consequences in the reaction of the member states, and corrections have been made. And Article 7 procedure, which is a nuclear procedure only on paper. And the reality is that under Article 7 procedure, to actually reach the point where we could have some retaliation, well, not retaliation, some consequences basically, and some measures taken and some sanctions, we do need unanimity. For the imminent risk, we can, let's say, move on in actually placing this risk under a Article 7 procedure. Then for the actual sanctions to happen, we do need this unanimity. So I can hardly see how we could ever use fully this kind of tool in order to apply sanctions to the member states. We have seen last year in July the first Commission annual rule of law report, which is of course monitoring the situation of the 27 member states with the dedicated country chapters and focusing on the four main pillars that we know: the justice system, the anti-corruption framework, and I'm happy it's there; media pluralism, which is important, and I'm also happy it constitutes an individual pillar; and then checks and balances. The actual publication of the rule of law is more than welcome. Of the rule of law report is more than welcome, and it is an excellent step forward. The problem with it is that it has no actual recommendations or steps to be taken or more concrete actions to be proposed to the member states in order to correct those deficiencies or red flags or any issues that have been observed by the rule of law report. The European Parliament has been calling for a proper mechanism since 6 years ago, in 2015, when we proposed the so-called DRF mechanism, the mechanism for rule of law and fundamental rights, which would basically incorporate all of these different tools into one single system that could work. I am not necessarily very optimistic about the moment when we will have it, but nevertheless, I think that as soon as we can start using what tools we have at hand, then we should do this. The conditionality, a more applied and specific country by country rule of law report with recommendations. And I think that the Commission should not hesitate to approach the rule of law issues the way it approaches the European semester, for example. All of these tools that you are developing and in partnership with the Commission that could be actually used in the monitoring process with all of the proper indicators developed. Back to the conditionality mechanism, a few words about it. We obviously cannot afford to finance regimes which are either violating, blatantly violating the rule of law or seriously endangering it. When we speak about concrete things that could stop them or prevent them from doing so, I think we speak about fear of losing money. This is one very concrete element that we noticed a long time generates chills to those governments and those leaders, chills that have not been generated by other statements, types of monitoring, any kind of actions that we have tried, we have attempted in time. And it is true that basically the member states with the greatest issues in terms of rule of law, the notorious cases, let's say, are also those member states receiving the biggest share of EU funds. And during the negotiations for this conditionality, we have actually noticed that it was precisely this fear of actually finding themselves in the position of losing this money to block the mechanism and have such strong reactions to that. In the end, we did, I believe, with all of the issues that we had along the way, to basically have a compromise, which is, first of all, keeping a strong preventive aspect. And not only can it be triggered when we actually see a breach shown to directly affect the budget and the sound financial management of the Union, but it can also be triggered when there's a serious risk to do so, which is important. Because such a mechanism basically prevents possible situation where EU funds could finance actions that are in conflict with any of the EU values enshrined in Article 2. Obviously, there has to be this link to the EU budget, to proper financial management. But I believe that there is a quite generous area of possibilities of making these links or of showing that action can be taken when we have, let's say, a situation of endangering the activity of the judiciary, which could affect the financial interest of the Union, or a situation where conflict of interest is so broad that it affects the financial interest of the Union. I'm not quoting from hypothetical situations here, but from some already happening, if we think about that, and that could have been addressed through such a mechanism had we had one functioning, for example. I would, like I was saying earlier, love to see a commission that must not hesitate when it is using and when it has to use the full provisions of this regulation. Speaking about trust and speaking about rule of law, if we look at all of the data that we have on the table, and if we, for example, look at the European of the Eurobarometer on rule of law, the one in April 2019, we are seeing this overwhelming popular support for this value among the EU citizens. I mean, the numbers are impressive. I think of all values, this one is the one with the highest popular support. 94% of people find, for example, that judges' independence is essential or very, very important. We only have 4% respondents who consider it unimportant. Then 94% of the citizens think that it is important or essential that court rulings should be respected. 91% recognize the need for judicial review of public authorities' activities, and this is something that also shows awareness of the activity that and the decisions of the judiciary and scrutiny and so on. All of these are elements of a democratic exercise that people show they are aware of, and I think this is important. It also shows an evolution in the society in the Union. So I think that on this basis of trust of citizens, we should not hesitate to use and improve instruments that we have. And I do believe that this one with the conditionality will work. I do not know whether we should abuse it, but try and use it efficiently, with also the whole process involving a warning for the member states, the possibility for that member state to do the proper corrections, the very concrete time framework that we have at our disposal to correct some mistakes and so on, things that have not happened before. We were always in this endless temporary framework where things could evaluate one way or another with impunity most of the times and with no consequences. And then maybe a final remark before we discuss more or we answer questions. There's obviously no magic wand for solving corruption and tackling corruption overnight, or fraud, or any of the things, or fixing the rule of law overnight, any of the things that are recognized European values and we are basically all one way or another fighting for. But it does take a process where we do need instruments, functional instruments, apart from monitoring and recommendations, obviously. We also need expertise, because on how we monitor, what we should follow, how these kind of results of projects like yours, for example, can influence one policy or another, can trigger a mechanism or another. This has to be something done constantly, I think, by the institutions together with experts. And here I come back to a thought that I always remind, first of all, the institutions and the Commission, every time I have this opportunity, that expertise, this expertise within the civil society needs to be used. And it does need to be formally accepted and extended so that the proper observers of various phenomena, including corruption and including dismantling the rule of law, should be incorporated in official reporting, official action, and it should have results, tangible results, and a lot more than, I don't know, marginal reporting or very dedicated sequencing or some conference. We should be bold in this kind of approach as well. And then we always know that that there's also a matter of willingness of a government, of a member state, to tackle corruption, to fight fraud, to fight organized crime, and to involve specialists, resources, legislation into this process. This is something that needs to be constantly encouraged. I don't know if only with threats, but with a lot of encouragement from the level of the institutions and active involvement from the level of the European institutions. Because obviously we will have no results where there's no willingness to do it, or very little results compared to what could be achieved. And again, it takes resilience, it takes resources. We have an EU anti-fraud program that I was actually debating today in the plenary within the new MFF 2021-2027. It's a small instrument, but it also, for example, helps enhancing national capacities, providing resources, IT tools, encouraging and helping the work of the joint teams working on different programs to counter fraud. All of these are instruments that should be, first of all, presented, then developed, then actively proposed to the member states so that they get engaged and more involved in this process as well. These are just a series of thoughts. Thank you very much again for your invitation. I'm happy to answer your questions as well. Like I said, my main question is, what do you do with your project and with your findings and with the things that you are discussing today, and how will the Commission use them further in order to have proper anti-corruption policies and anti-corruption mechanisms? Thank you.
Thank you very much again, Ramona. I mean, you are one of the leading voices in the European Parliament and in Europe on anti-corruption issues, and we need. One of the steps we were thinking is actually to brief the intergroup we were hoping that this would happen in person, but we could also set up a separate meeting where we could brief on the more specific findings. One of the things that we did is essentially what we saw. The reason we wanted to focus on state capture is that a lot of leaders in Europe had actually effectively hijacked the anti-corruption agenda. You know, they've used rhetoric that essentially has reduced the scope for civil society action on that. But at the same time, we've seen a lot of areas where on national level or even on sectoral level within national boundaries, like on wholesale of fuels, and I don't want to step over my colleagues' presentations, but this was important. Why we wanted to look at state capture, because very often on the surface, everything looks okay. I mean, there is no bribery, there is no even abuse of office, but they're already there. You know, there are those networks, you know, that work in that way, and that we have found out is actually quite a common phenomenon in many member states. Of course, Bulgaria and Romania and Central and Eastern Europe have been one of the glaring examples. I do second. I mean, one of the things that we found out is that conditionality actually works. We've seen this in the case of Bulgaria and Romania clearly with the CVM mechanism. I mean, essentially it was effective until it had a precautionary clause that could be triggered and induce pain, including with EU funds. I don't see at the moment any questions, but I wanted to just abuse my right of, you know, to ask you a question back, and we will be working with the Commission. I mean, this project essentially put on a completely different level what we've already done in the past 10 years. You know, designing instruments for working with specific institutions on anti-corruption level, designing an instrument to monitor, to diagnose state capture, and now putting this all on sectoral level and trying to build an instrument that is going to give us a risk assessment tool that would be able in real time to tell us where issues might emerge and how we could tackle this. But I wanted to ask back very quickly two things that we've seen internationally, you know, and in particular in the US, but I think we should follow Q. And we've seen this recently also in the UK, who are now outside, of course, the EU. But they've, in the Magnitsky-style legislation that the EU has also adopted, you know, they've included anti-corruption as part of the reasons as part of the ammunition for sanctioning. The EU hasn't done that yet. Do you think that you would be looking at that and you would be doing that? And secondly, taking cue and remembering the Eurozone crisis, with the Greece crisis, the crisis with all the money laundering that we've seen it through Nordic banks or through large-scale established European banks. We were thinking about a much more aggressive Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, at least within the EU, at least in the bounds of the EU, so that no European companies allow themselves to bribe foreign but still EU officials within the EU. So I was going to ask you whether you foresee any such immediate action, and also to ask everybody, if you have immediate questions to Romolo Strugariu, please ask it now. But Romolo, if you could just address these two questions, that would be really grateful. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. I will be very direct on answering the whole story of the Magnitsky-like legislation that we, as a matter of fact, wanted to entitle it or have a reference to Magnitsky in the title of this legislation, but we did not succeed because there were certain member states which opposed that. And in the end, because we wanted to pass it and we wanted to have a mechanism, a proper mechanism with sanctions functioning, that was a compromise allowing it to pass. And we wanted anti-corruption in there. And this was actually one of the proposals coming from the Renew Europe group and strongly supported by the group. There were other supporters as well. Obviously, it was on the agenda of the anti-corruption intergroup. It is not there because there was not enough willingness from the member states to include it, which doesn't mean that we give up. Like we did not give up the idea of having Magnitsky-like legislation and one which is actually functioning in the European Union. I am not saying that we will do things very quickly. What I can say is that in both situations that you mentioned, the European Parliament, I would say, has the most elaborate view and the bold one, let's say, supporting these initiatives. But how quickly they will happen, that is a matter where I really cannot respond. What I believe matters at the end of the day is the constant pressure on these topics, and not only these topics but others as well, that we can keep through the Parliament, through the various institutional actors which are actually interested, through the voices of the civil society. So we push and organize discussions and adopt our initiative reports and try to move things until they actually happen. I do not believe there will be a very easy discussion on these kind of topics with the Council, because obviously a lot of things happened during the pandemic. There will follow a lot of scrutiny on the side of the Commission. I truly hope so, and I heard it, as a matter of fact, on the way money was spent, starting with the first, let's say, flexible amount of money and the allowed use of this money for countering and tackling the pandemic, until the resources and the money from the this new MFF plus obviously RRF and everything else that needs proper scrutiny. And you probably know it as I do, that public procurement under this framework, and starting from the beginning of the crisis until now and the years to come, has to be very, very seriously scrutinized, and everything that falls under the umbrella this money, basically the way it was used, and it will continue to be used to help economies, to support the efforts of the member states and so on. And the truth is that there were a lot of people, and there are a lot of people making money out of tragedies, and there will be. And my serious concern is that, you know, when a government, for example, does that or closes their eyes to that, that government or those officials will absolutely be incapable, completely incapable to uphold the rule of law, to preserve any kind of values, of European values, to do anything that we would want them to do for the rule of law. This is so obvious, you know. These mere findings should trigger a very, very serious red flag on the capacity of such officials and governments to address the issues that are so important to us, like countering fraud and corruption and, you know, fighting for these values. So no time framework to sum up for your questions, but definitely support from the European Parliament for these projects. And I would also like to facilitate maybe a discussion and a presentation within the anti-corruption intergroup of your findings. We'll propose it to my colleagues and think of a format where we can discuss it maybe with some guests from the Commission as well.
That's perfect. Great. Thank you very much again for taking the time to be with us. I think I see some people are impatient to see also the results of what we do. But thank you very much for this policy overview. I think it's important because it allows us to think bigger and, of course, think of how to implement our results. Now it's my pleasure to turn the floor to my colleague, Laura Stefan, who is the Rule of Law and Anti-Corruption Coordinator of Expert Forum, as well as Executive Director. Laura, this event is yours now. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ruslan. And yes, the first presentation would actually bring to you the findings of our pilot project that we implemented in Bulgaria, Italy, Romania, and Spain. And for that, we will have a presentation from Dr. Todor Galev, who is the Director of Research at the Center for the Study of Democracy. Todor works in the field of social, economic, and sociological studies on state capture and corruption, energy sector governance, and innovation policies. His expertise also include open data for assessment and monitoring of public policies. Dr. Galev, the floor is yours. Please try to keep your intervention within 15 minutes, preferably 12, because we are a bit behind the schedule. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Laura. I shared my screen. Hope that you seen it.
Yes, we see it.
You can see it. Okay, thank you. I'll present very briefly a brief outline, actually, of the integrated methodological framework for assessing state capture on sectoral level that we have developed, as well as some major findings from its pilot application in 4 European countries: Bulgaria, Italy, Romania, and Spain. Our work became possible through the grant under the Security Fund Police of the DG Home, and I would like to thank them for this opportunity. The work was carried out by a consortium of 4 partners, led by Center for the Study of Democracy and including e-crime research group at the University of Trento, Italy, Expert Forum from Romania, and the Civil Foundation from Spain. I want also to credit here the support of Bisport, a global supplier of procurement data, a tech company that helped us in the development of SceMaps, web-based data analytics platform that we use, and which is one of the main outcomes of our efforts. As Ruslan already mentioned in the beginning, our pilot application was focused on 3 high-risk sectors identified as such in our previous research on state capture assessment on national level, which I'll mention in a while. We define state capture as a combination of different forms of corruption, which have a single objective: to secure a large-scale and long-term privileges to captors by exploiting the power of government for private benefit. State capture is a hidden phenomenon. Most of the evidences for its presence are separate ad hoc cases. Quantitative estimations are very few and usually include only proxy symptoms of state capture, but not direct measurements. However, the key characteristics of state capture is the public traces it leaves behind. Because it needs to affect public policy, it is bound to leave these public traces or visible effects, which can be discovered by suitable pattern finding methods. The definition and understanding of the concept of state capture was developed by CSD within the state capture assessment diagnostics approach. It was designed to identify and assess, namely, the public traces from the existence of state capture practices and to recommend policy adjustments accordingly. SCAT measures state capture results and effects, while the processes of capture remains most often hidden and inaccessible. Our approach of assessing state capture on sectoral level includes 2 of the major components of our SCAT framework. So we measured business state capture pressure, which includes different components of privilege status that captors could have, and institutional enablers, which assess the institutional characteristics that affect the system of governance, allowing or facilitating state capture. Following the approach of state capture assessment and diagnostics, which measures state capture on national level, we have developed an integrated methodological framework for assessing state capture on sectoral level. It is designed as a policy instrument able to detect, assess, and monitor state capture pressure and vulnerabilities in particular sectors, but also, which is important, on institution level, in particular institutions, and also other actors like companies. Our approach combines 3 mutually complementary methodologies and their respective instruments. The first one assess state capture symptoms and vulnerabilities at sectoral level and guides further in-depth sectoral investigations. The second one, called Monitoring Anti-Corruption Policy Implementation, or MACPI, evaluates the implementability and coverage of anti-corruption measures and policies on the level of individual public institution. It is an instrument designed to provide concrete policy advice to the institution's management, particularly. And the last methodology, data analytics for risk assessment, includes data analytics for risk assessment of corruption-related behavior in public procurement based on a set of red flags indicators using linked data from 3 domains: public procurement, company financial and ownership information, and media content. In my presentation, I will focus only on the results from the state capture assessment on sectoral level and the data analytics, as MACPI results are focused on particular institutions and should be reviewed separately. The analysis of the business state capture, as we called dimension in the overall state capture concept, and of the institutional enablers, is based on expert assessments which are used to construct quantifiable indexes. The results are additionally cross-checked and verified with the results from the data analytics based on hard data from public procurement, company data, and media. The business state capture pressure index for Bulgaria, Italy, Romania, and Spain reveals actually the existence of systematic problems of well-established and long-term forms of state capture in all of the sectors that we measured. Spain has the highest scores of the index in two sectors, construction and wholesale of pharmaceuticals, followed by a bit lower score of Romania in wholesale of pharmaceuticals and Bulgaria, while Italy remained last with lowest index values. But the important takeout from this is that actually the selected three sectors have been highly vulnerable to corruption and state capture according to the business state capture pressure index. However, the countries rank differently according to the subcomponents of the index, indicating the country and sector specific characteristics. Bulgaria is the most vulnerable to the monopolization pressure, stemming from the trends towards monopoly, oligopoly, or formation of cartels in all the sectors, with civil engineering as a subsector of construction having highest index score among all countries and all sectors. Wholesale of fuels in Bulgaria should also be noted, as it ranks second among the countries, based predominantly on suspected situation of cartel in the sector, despite the numerous decisions of the national competition regulator reporting its absence. Italy ranked second in with an average score of 75 of all the sectors according to the monopolization pressure index, while Romania and Spain has lower values. The construction sector is the most vulnerable one among the three under consideration, also according to the specific monopolization pressure index, which assessed a set of illegal practices aiming at ensuring competitive advantages for particular companies, including privileged access to procurement, lobbyist laws, selective application of control and sanctions, and concentration of public grants and subsidies. Having scored above 70 for all countries, the construction sector against exceed the other two sectors by the results and revealed the widespread presence of these practices in it. The red flag assessment, based on the analysis of procurement, company, and media data, confirms most of the major findings from the indexes, actually. Bulgaria and Romania appear as more vulnerable than the other two countries. On the both sides of supplier or contracting authorities, public institutions, in most of the cases, and on the side of on the both side of supplier, which is the companies, and on the side of buyers, which refers to contracting authorities and public institutions. Particularly Italy remains the less captured state in this respect, according to the overall results from all the red flags that we applied here. The assessment reveals that the state capture risk in public procurement in Bulgaria and Romania are twice to several times higher, depending on the indicator, than in the other two countries. Here you can see an example of the buyer concentration index, which calculates the concentration of sums awarded by a contracting authority to a particular supplier. Bulgaria ranks first with high share of public authorities concentrating over 60% of their sums awarded only to a single supplier. It has been also first for public authorities concentrating over 90% of their sums to a given supplier. Here's another example from the red flag indicators referring to the so-called procurement exposure to revenue ratio, which represents the risk that some companies depend highly on public procurement to survive, and thus they are more vulnerable to use illegal means to gain an advantage over their competitors. Despite Romania and Bulgaria have similar number of companies that raised this flag for the whole period 2011-2019 that we studied, in relative terms, actually Romanian companies are smaller share of all awarded companies in the country. Or in other words, unfortunately, Bulgaria again appears as more vulnerable according to this indicator. It is important to note here that I haven't used any example in this analysis for the risk and vulnerabilities on the level of a particular public authority or company, as the analysis addressed only the sectoral and country level. But one of the major benefits from the interactive data analytics offered by the SceMaps platform, which is publicly available and you can find on the web address that you can see here on the slide, is exactly the possibility to see the performance according to the different red flag indicators and other profiling data for both buyers, so public authorities, and suppliers or companies. It could be used by different stakeholder groups when they want to investigate or even design preventive measures. This could be policymakers or control and law enforcement institutions, but also civil society experts, watchdog organizations, investigative journalists, and so on. The inevitable position of Bulgaria and partially of Romania is confirmed also by the Institutional Enablers Index, which reflects the vulnerability of institutional environment and has the highest value for all sectors in Bulgaria, with an average score of 40, followed by Italy and Romania, and with significantly lower values in Spain. In fact, Spain has most robust institutional environment as compared to the level of state capture pressure, which means that the country institutions are more resilient. However, in terms of index components, such as lack of integrity or ineffectiveness of anti-corruption policies that have high scores in all the sectors and all the countries, the other three countries also need to improve the resilience capacity of their key regulatory and control institutions. And I want to finish with a short but very important question. What we could do as next steps? The widespread signs of state capture risk and vulnerabilities in the three sectors of the countries that we studied, coupled with the lack of specialized policies and regulations for tackling this phenomenon in a systematic manner, reveals the need for improving both the policy and the professional and the administrative capacity of key public institutions. Actually, all the countries have quite well developed anti-corruption policies and frameworks, institutional and regulatory frameworks, but usually they refer to different symptoms of state capture as separated issues and not in a systematic way. So this is something that we should that should be changed. Particularly, control, regulatory and law enforcement institutions should develop capabilities for identifying and monitoring state capture processes in their complexity, and especially in high risky sectors or areas of economic life. The analyzed sectors of construction, wholesale of fuels, and wholesale of pharmaceuticals proved to be highly vulnerable, particularly in terms of governance of public spending through procurement, but also in terms of the efficiency of institutional and regulatory framework for tackling well-established and long-term existing form of corruption. And here we don't speak about what is called petty corruption or bribery. We are speaking about political corruption, top-level corruption, and also these hidden forms of state capture mentioned by Ruslan in the very beginning that are very, very difficult to be identified and investigated. But as I hope we show with our research results, some signs of them at least could be measured and identified. And last but not least, the identification of highly risk zones following an evidence-based approach, such as like the current one, is needed, and it will allow the implementing the policy makers to implement interventions that would prevent state capture proliferation to other related areas of the economic and social life. So I saw that my time is finished, and with this I want to thank you for your attention, and I will stay ready for your questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Todor. Thank you for staying within the time limits also. I will invite all the attendees and participants in general to this conference to think of questions, write them down, write them in the Q&A section, or raise your hand if you would like to intervene so that we can have a conversation once we finish with the presentations. With that, we move to Sorin Ionita, my colleague, the president of Expert Forum and a well-known expert in the area of good governance, administrative reform, and anti-corruption. Mr. Ionita, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I will pick it up from where Todor left it, so with this message to look forward and see what is to be done, and connect this thing to what Ruslan said at the beginning, because we have to see what opportunities are now to develop such an agenda and include the civil society at large in the policymaking process on this transparentization. And I think the opportunity is very good, because apart from the anti-corruption agenda to which Ruslan referred, we also have another one, and this is this new the new generation recovery thing, the plans, the national plans that everybody is discussing now with the Commission with various degrees of success. And one of the main points is actually transparentization and digitization. We all have to address these priorities, and if our project was about something, it was about this: how to build new tools and to use opportunities offered by digitization in order to do something very important, which is prevent corruption, because this is mostly about prevention, actually, to take the load out of the repression mechanism, to ease the job of the judiciary and the prosecutors, and to do more at the in the upstream stages, right? So to try not to get there to corruption, to state capture. And I think this transparentization and open government agenda is what we should push for in the next period. And in a way, you know, in a paradoxical way, the pandemic crisis opened this window of opportunity for us. And this instrument is just a small pilot in what we could do even more. And indeed, we should open the doors everywhere, including at the Commission, the European institutions, and be able to monitor using, if you want, the wiki intelligence. So if you put data in public in a relevant format, you don't need to invest much capacity as public institution, as national government, Commission, into analyzing data, because people will do it, journalists will do it, and when they see something fishy, they will flag it up. And in this sense, what we build up is a very, very useful, I dare say, instrument. Now, just to point out that on top of what we did, there are, at least from our experience in Romania, I think it's applicable very well in Bulgaria, but to some extent in every EU member state, there are three main channels of influence if we look at resources. So how states are captured through the misappropriation of resources. And the first is the allocation of resources in territory. And this was part of our analysis, right? Because we had this construction work sector in which lots of local and regional governments are involved. So there's a lot of money going back and forth between central governments and local governments, and they end up in investment projects. And this is a very big avenue for clientelization in a state. And even in our countries, at least in Romania and Eastern Europe, even of perverting politics. This is how you build parties. This is how you buy mayors or regional presidents. And this is how you know, sometimes this is how you influence majorities by skewing up these investment projects. So this is one reason to keep an eye on them. And I would like to share the screen if I'm able. Am I? I don't know how Todor did it to have this face near the slides, but I'll go along with this. So we've been working on for many years. We started more than 10 years ago on monitoring all the investments projects in the local governments in Romania. And put them in a readable format. Everything is in real time and it's clickable here. And I'm not able to see the legend on the right anyway, but it can be analyzed by party affiliation, by year, by type of locality, and it can be done in absolute sums or on per capita sums. We have the per capita analysis. And then you can follow up with a lot of analysis, which we did here below. And it connects very well to what Todor said before, because we go to the analysis by subsector or even clusters of companies, and then you can find what the aggregate number which is present in the general report, which Todor presented. You can find illustrations of it. So in what sense there is institutional co-option, in what sense some parts of the private business sector are over-reliant on public contracts. And it's very good actually to go and see and do even, social cluster analysis on companies to see in what part of the territory they are more clientelistic, they are dependent on a certain municipality or regional government. This approach, what we did on the general framework, which is present in the instrument we built together for the 4 countries, is present in the report, or what you can detail further on at the national stage, this is very much translatable, and it can be scalable at the European, because in every European country, there is a mechanism to finance local investments, and more or less the logic is the same in every country, just the details differ. So we can build a framework of analysis for all EU member countries and even put numbers on things and continue. So what we started to do on 4 countries, we can generalize for the whole EU membership and come up with some numbers. So why not? I think we should push for it. If I understand correctly, all the agenda of the New Generation Fund and how we should reform the administration in Europe in the next 5 years and how we should invest in digitization, it's just about that. And the situation is not good. I mean, I can speak for Romania. I think it's partly applicable to Bulgaria, but the project that I showed you, so all the local investments project in Romania, there are more than 12,000 projects now going on, all in the hands of the ministry. The evidence is awful. Sometimes most of it is kept on paper. The central government doesn't know anything about the contractors, the companies. They don't even know what projects are completed or still ongoing. And this has been going on for 7 or 8 years. If we don't digitalize this, I mean, why do we bother to do anything? This is high stakes because the sums are huge. Now I want to stop this share and to show you that we did, in order to involve the civil society, we also created, this is in Romanian, but you understand, a detector of clientelism. So this is like a guideline to try to involve other civil societies or local watchdog organizations from small municipalities or the investigative media to try to educate them a little bit about local budget and this system of investment, because it's not so easy to read it actually. A local budget is not so easy to understand for ordinary citizens. So we have these online resources, and in a very arrogant way, we piloted the same concept in the Republic of Moldova and the Republic of Georgia, where we have the same maps. well, they are not exactly up to date because it was just an one-off project. So here we have the Republic of Georgia with the funds at the local level, and you can search for year, locality, or type of investments. This is just a very small illustration that the same logic can be applied everywhere. So if we can do it there, we can do it in all the Balkan countries. Why not? If we care about how politics is clientelized using public funds. And this is one area of analysis. I won't expand on the other two, but the second, of course, is state-owned enterprises, or rather public enterprises, which includes municipal or regional enterprises. And you know that this is a resource, a fantastic resource exploited by the parties, by the political parties in countries which are clientelistic. And the most visible probably, but not the most important part, is when they put people in positions, so nepotism in hiring. This is visible, and media loves it because you find, you know, very exotic cases of a hairdresser which was put in charge of the nuclear plant. It happens. I mean, I'm not inventing things, but the most significant part is how they siphon off resources out of public companies through contracts. And this, again, it's can be standardized, and we can measure it. And this is the report that we started made steps in this direction. And the third, you know, the third channel of influence and of siphoning of resources are the sensitive sectors. And I will refer just to one, the healthcare sector, which is covered in our report. This is important because traditionally you had a lot of, how should I put it, non-standard procurement in it. Just think what it means when the government defines the list with compensated drugs, which are sold, you know, to the citizens on compensated prices. This is like a huge procurement, indirect procurement scheme, and there are a lot, I mean, the stakes are very high when you define it, but it doesn't go by the normal procurement rules. And then we had the pandemics in the last year, which just increased the stake. You know, we are talking about the healthcare sector, and we have all these situations where they did, you know, fast procurement last year in 2020, just because they had to buy things in emergency situations. And again, we have a string of scandals coming out from this process. Now, if we put all these three dimensions together, we take the dimensions which we addressed in the big report, which was presented by Todor on the 4 countries. We detail it at the national. This is, you know, building resilience to corruption. I mean, if I understand correctly, if I read correctly, what the vision of the Commission, the whole Europe with a new plan, this is what it means to build resilience in communities and to build a better society, make it more transparent and more efficient. And it shouldn't be very difficult. Let's take this. I mean, it needs a lot of work, because if you just throw data in public, they don't make sense. We need to work. It needs, you know, a translation. It needs intermediaries, which is what we did in the project, so that the citizens, the investigative journalists understand what is there. But once this work is done and you put everything is public, I mean, you offload a huge task from the shoulders of the government. They don't need to search, you know, every aspect of it, because the society will do it. They will look at discrepancies, they will see a lot of things, and they will press for improvement. And in this sense, yes, I think this is the right moment. I mean, in a way, this crisis is an opportunity for us, for the civil society and the independent sector, to press for this agenda. Let's invest seriously in such instruments. Let's scale them up. Let's generalize them for the whole Europe, and see what comes up of it. Right? And then probably the job will be easier for prosecutors and judges, because they will have fewer cases. This is like an investment in prevention. And I will stop here because I'm a bit over time. Back to you, Laura.
Thank you very much, Sorin. We now move to Martin Țanov, who is a co-founder of BIS Portal. BIS Portal is a provider of global procurement and corporate data solution. Using their domain knowledge and expertise in developing public procurement data products, Martin has been working closely with us, with CSD and SceMaps Consortium, to develop the analytical features of the SceMaps EU platform. So to you, Martin, and then just to announce our participants that list their questions in the questions and answers box. We will be promoting you to panelists so that you are able to actually start a conversation with my colleagues after this presentation. So to you, Martin.
Thank you, Laura. Thank you for the kind introduction. Hi, everyone. Thank you. I would like to start with actually expressing my gratitude to the entire project team and to Todor and Sorin, who outlined some of the major findings, and especially Todor already shedded some light on some of the main findings of the SceMaps data and analytical platform, which is one of the main outputs of our project. I would like to actually, let me share my screen. I would like to really organize my brief presentation by really focusing on three major stages in what we have developed. I don't know if you've seen my presentation. So
yes, we see it.
Yes.
Yes, but please put it in full screen.
Yes, yes. Really, what we try to do first of all is to outline the main goals and the challenges we are trying to really fight here, and then I would like to look at the resources that we used, that we had at our disposal, but also resources that we specifically wanted to use in order to try and develop something more innovative. Because as Ruslan said, I believe at the beginning of the presentation, there has been some work, serious work done in the field, but we wanted to address it in a different way. And then I would look at the results, the main platform options for users, but also some of what we find successful, what are some of the shortcomings and the work that needs to be done, because there is a lot of interesting insights that we believe we've got from the work so far. And of course, lastly, we could think of, and maybe we could have that in the discussion after my presentation, about some policy changes that are actually very much related to what Sorin said about the open government agenda, which corresponds directly to the work that we have been doing, and also to the type of products like the SceMaps analytical platform that not only our team, but other teams are trying to build. So first of all, the main objectives. So what we try to do is really to find the most efficient ways to utilize publicly available data in order to increase transparency. We wanted to create a monitoring platform for suspicious behavior related to state capture. And here, I don't want to go into too much detail between the difference between state capture and petty corruption, because there is such. Here we were mostly trying to address the state capture, why companies that all of a sudden that's why we tried, and you've seen the data, to look at outliers, companies that are trying to that appear to win a lot of tenders in a very short period, or recent success, as we were mentioning, companies winning tenders shortly after incorporation, companies, as already Todor said, exclusively dependent on public funds, let's say, not only public procurement, favoritism by certain political parties. That's why we built some of the flags related to how they're performing in different election terms and governance terms. And the innovation here is we really try to approach the issue from a multi-angle perspective. What I mean here is that we didn't only look at public procurement data, and we work with contract awards data only. This is important to say. But also, as my colleague said, we were looking at corporate data, media data, and a few other auxiliary information feeds. The other major goal, it's at the bottom of my slide, but it's very important, is that this is a pilot project. And we would like, this is a pilot project, but we wanted to show that this is scalable in an EU-wide context. As you could see, the resources that we had, actually, it's not moving for some reason. Yes. So the project scope already, people Todor said, we piloted in 4 countries in 3 high corruption risk sectors. So it means that, so the resources that we had is the open public data. So public procurement data, corporate data, which is trade registries. We knew that we are going to use limited usage of paid access to corporate data. I'll talk about that at the results page after that. Media data and government terms data. And we wanted to use really big data processing. So stages of collection, aggregation, and analytics. Use techniques like named entity recognition, multi-step matching process. I don't want to go into too much technical details, but also machine learning algorithms based on training sets and grouping of keyword dictionaries. What we didn't use, and maybe that's a good idea for future development, is sentiment analysis of some of, especially for the news data, which could be useful in future work on this. So the results, the 4 main menu navigation options are ranking, profiling, red flagging, and market sizing. So ranking is available both for companies, for buyers and suppliers. You could rank the companies by as you could see on the left-hand side of each. You could see the 4 main navigation options at top of your screen, and on the left-hand side are the different selection fields. So for ranking, companies could be ranked by contract awards frequency, size of contract awards, of average value of contracts, and recent success in the last 12 months. And this is available on sectoral and local level, and also for a customized time range. So you could look at 1 year, 2 years, quarters, etc. This is how it looks. For the profiling, you could search for a company. Users could search for a company or an institution, specific one in the profiling search field. But also, actually, you could access a company profile from all the ranking, profile, red flagging, from different places in the platform. You will actually look. You could click on the company's name and look at the profile. So what is really important, these are the institutional profile, the buyer data points, mostly their procurement. It's pretty much an overview of procurement activity. For suppliers, it's even more interesting because you have subsidiaries. So each company is classified as a parent or a child company, and the links between parents and child companies are, you could go in both directions and look at what tender activity they have, and then on the aggregated picture. And what is really important, as you could see, there is the contracting entity, the buyer concentration index. So you could see that in the profile. This is how a profile looks like. In the actually, you could see the subsidiaries list. As I said, for example, this company is a parent company, but if you click on a child company, there is a direct link. For government terms, actually, you could see in the bottom right, the government terms. It's interesting that if a company participates in 2 countries, actually, you could look at their procurement performance in both countries when compared on the basis of different election terms and governance terms of different governments. So there is also tenders amount per industry, and at the bottom you could see contracting entity concentration index. So you could see the most generous buyers to those companies. Red flagging, which is probably the most important part. The main groups really are 4. So there is, as I already mentioned, there are 17 red flags, but there are 4 main groups. So red flags per most notable recent success, high exposure to procurement, which is as compared to different company demographical data, revenue, net income, total assets, number of employees, concentration levels, and other stuff like incorporation time proximity index, which means if the company received their first award very, very soon after it was incorporated. We're not pointing fingers here, but sometimes that could look very, very suspicious if it was created for that. Suspicious activity news, so the number of mentions in articles, in media articles that are where the mentions are related to participation in public procurement that raised some suspicions in the public or different accusations, and government terms volatilities I mentioned. So here some of the red flags. Todor already said that we organize the results are actually being displayed in a descending order as per 5 red flag levels, with 5 red flags being the most the highest risk companies, and this is calculated on a percentile, as a percentile level compared to the peer companies in the same country or in the same industry. I think this was, I believe, already shown by Todor. There's some very, very interesting findings from some of those red flags. Okay, last but not least, we have a macro market sizing menu option where diverse macro comparison analytical options are available. So, for example, the size and the competitiveness of the procurement market in different countries and in different sectors, the number of tenders, suppliers, and buyers, where it could be seen in various timeline basis. Obviously, it allows comparisons between countries and industries. So the main metrics that the users could actually choose from are single metrics and ratio metrics. The results are shown in line charts like that. It could, as you could see, it could be multiple line charts. So the graphic is the graphs are pretty interactive. So this is really in a nutshell what the platform offers. So here are a few insights, and I'll probably I'll leave you with those the last few sentences here because they're very, very important. So first of all, I would like to talk about the features that show the best empirical results, or the successes, let's say, of our pilot work so far, which we believe and we hope will continue. So this is definitely scalable to not even EU, but EEA members. So this is definitely a scalable project, and it could be available in real time, I would say even on daily basis. Although there is no need to go on daily basis, which high frequency, but weekly, monthly, or quarterly basis. In terms of specific red flags, first of all, the concentration indices. Todor already talked about that. We find them very, very successful. Most notable recent success per industry and per location could be quite telling. Incorporation time proximity index is also useful, although it is limited by the existence of consortiums. And although we try to break them up as much as possible, this is something that kind of doesn't help the usefulness of this index, but it's quite telling. And of course, procurement exposure ratio. And I would like to talk in specifics for procurement per exposure ratio per total assets, which is could be very telling and could be useful for companies in the construction industry, where we have seen certain companies that are very successful in terms of procurement awards, but they don't really have a lot of assets. So how are they exactly performing their work? So in that regard, it's definitely something interesting. From the macro analytical options, the level of competitiveness or the average euro received per supplier per country, there are very interesting comparisons there. Average euro awarded by a buyer, and also the contract size, the average contract size, and the procurement, the share of public procurement as part of the overall sector, where the higher the public sector, in terms of as a percentage of the sector turnover, the higher the risk for corruption is just usually this is how it works. Some shortcomings which could be organized in three main groups. Let's first talk about tender data, the public procurement data. So it's still, tender data is still very noisy. Let's not beat around the bush here. So contract awards data very often lack the exact values in euros, especially in case of multiple awardees. Access to local tender data, and this is very important when we discuss it on policy level. Access to local tender level, local tender data is still very much inconsistent between EU member states. Then when we're talking about company corporate data, the same. Access to trade registries, to open corporate data is also still inconsistent between EU member states. And then in terms of news, for now, we find a weak link or a weaker link between news data and the other two branches of data. There are other very technical specific things that probably some experts and data enthusiasts we could discuss, but there are multiple approaches to name variations, parent-child relations on company level, which undermine the aggregation. And aggregation is very important in order to find suspicious activity. Last but not least, lag in election terms and government terms sometimes causes weak match. There is a lag, so it's a lagging data, and there is a weak match between tender success and the new government. So we hope to find an even better relationship.
Martin, I will have to intervene one more minute so that we can have some discussions.
Absolutely. Actually, this is my last slide, I promise. So, what are some opportunities for future development? As I said, different teams working on the matter. So, first of all, as I said, introducing data standards with clarity on the entire pre-award and selection process. What I mean is, yes, there has been great work done by the DGWIS team and other teams in terms of criteria, but still, as I said, there are differences. The data scarcity is still a problem, and a huge recommendation. Full disclosure of bidding could be key for creating a whole another layer of analysis. So if we could look at bidders and then actually calculate success rate as compared to participation, this is very, very good, but we don't have it in Europe yet. Better company data and more transparency, clear definitions, as I said, on parent-child relationship. For news data, there could be, we could add sentiment analysis, fake news detector in order to build meaningful red flags using media data. And something more exotic, but we've seen it in the US partially, but transparency or indicative market prices. Because if you have the real-time market prices for certain products and services, it could be very, very interesting to look at prices and contract awards that are much higher than the actual price for the same product. So these are just some interesting directions that we could go from now on. But the good news is that it's definitely scalable. There are some very, very interesting findings, and there is still work to be done. So definitely interesting. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Martin. Now we move to the discussion part, and I will ask my colleague Lilia to promote Sasha Georgiovic first, then Irina Fayon, and then Gudrun Steinecker. And I apologize already for the possible mispronunciation. So you will be promoted as panelists to be able to ask the questions. Please bear in mind when you're not speaking, mute yourself. So I'll now pass the floor to Sasha Georgiovic. Please introduce yourself briefly and tell us what your affiliation is.
Okay, thank you, Laura, very much. So my name is Sasha. I'm from Serbia. I'm also a PhD candidate at the Faculty of Security Justice and Criminal Justice and Security in Slovenia. So basically, I have two questions. One question is more or less answered in the chat box, but actually I'm quite interested to see. So basically there are 4 subcategories to measure institutional labor. So is Spain better in all 4 subcategories? So that's the first question. So, and I'm not sure about this second subcategory. So it seems that there are 2 dimensions. So first dimension about public official integrity, and it's a bit confusing. The first part is concentrated on individual values, while the second on institutional strength. So I'm quite interested in how research measures public official integrity. And one more question.
I will have to stop you, unfortunately, because we need to have time for all the discussants to intervene. But thank you very much.
No problem.
Todor, I'll pass this to you.
Okay, thank you. As I answered already in the chat box, the Institutional Neighbors Index actually consists of 4 components: anti-corruption effectiveness, integrity of public officials, impartiality, and lack of bias. All these have been measured through expert assessments by experts that are familiar with the particular sector and also with particular control and regulatory institutions that have been assessed. And to the question, yes, Spain performs better in all of the components of the index as compared particularly to Bulgaria and Romania. If we compare with Italy, there are some subcomponents where Italy is better, in another Spain is better, and so on. But in general, as compared to the, I would say, the most vulnerable countries in our subgroup of 4 countries, Spain has lowest values of this index and its subcomponents, this is a reason for us to conclude that the Spanish institutions are more resilient to state capture influences and to the facilitating of state capture, because actually it's the institution that a public institution that allow and facilitate state capture processes without I would say an active, even hidden support from the institution. State capture couldn't emerge. What's the reason for this? Well, this is due to the post-socialist context or path dependency in Bulgaria and Romania, and I couldn't say on this point at this point, but it is the differences between the levels are very telling, and these differences we found not only in this particular project, but also in similar projects that have been done before that, including some other countries that do not have post-socialist path dependency, like, for example, Czech Republic, and so on and so on. So maybe this is one of the reasons, but yeah, this is not the subject of this research.
Thank you. Thank you, Todor. We move to Ms. Rina Fayon. Could you please unmute yourself, Ms. Fayon?
Yes.
Super.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes. Hello everybody, and very happy to participate in this conference. Well, the topic of anti-corruption is something that actually pursues me, I think, in my career. I've been working with a Center for the Study of Democracy at the start of my career, and then later on in the program, in the local government program with the Open Society Foundations in Budapest, we actually used to do not quite anti-corruption work, but work related to openness and open government and transparency. And I'm just wondering, I was reminded by Sorin, who was then our partner as well, what exactly are the achievements at the local level and how he sees some practice-oriented results versus the very highly, very well-designed methodology, which I'm sure that you're all guys very good at. But what exactly are your observations on the practical effects of what you're doing? And I do agree that at the local level, it is at the local level that a lot of this corruption, actually not only petty one, happens, and it's really important to try to introduce openness and transparency there. And I'm curious at the effects and the results, especially in countries like Georgia. So I'll be happy to hear what Sorin maybe could offer as examples.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Fayon.
Thank you very
Sorin?
briefly. Thank you for the question, Irina. Yes, this was just, a small pilot project, but the question is very interesting about Moldova and Georgia. I read it in when you wrote the comment. In Georgia, our involvement was the shortest in terms of time. It was just one budget cycle. In both countries, we used local partners, of course, because it's good not just for collecting data and understanding context, but also for communication afterwards and, raising the profile of the issues. It was done about less than 2 years ago. And meanwhile, I mean, in the last 2 years, Georgia has suffered a lot of political instability and very big, if you want, existential issues. So it would be hard to discern, our advocacy in the whole turbulence of Georgian politics. So what difference did we make? However, there are some policy lessons. I don't want to waste too much time here with details, but it's a very interesting comparison to look even at these three countries, Georgia, Moldova, and Romania. You have very few local governments in Georgia. This is how they are organized. There are very few in numbers and relatively big, right? These in a weak institutional environment that makes them very easy to capture by the central government. So basically, after the national elections, all the mayors migrate into the party who wins the national elections. So I cannot even measure politicization with my methodology because the independent variable disappears. Political agenda. All of them go into the winning party. So and they start to trade funds on a different logic. But we did learn some lessons about how this could be addressed, and it was a conference there, and people started to speak more openly about how the money are allocated. In Moldova, we have had a longer involvement. And we look for many years. They have a lot of municipalities, very fragmented, and more funds. It's also one for eco investments, one for roads, and so on and so forth. So, and we've been looking at them for more than 1 year with a local partner. Now, we managed in the last round of Moldovan elections to raise this issue of one of the funds, which is called the road funds, a Good Roads Fund. This is how they call it. Of course, they don't have much money. But before we intervene and raised, the profile of this discussion, all the discussion was about in Moldova, how we divide it and do I get something in my commune and why does the other guy is getting more money? We managed to put this analysis on the agenda, and the Secretary of State in charge with this policy, with the roads, was forced to actually respond on TV and justify the policy. And then people started to have a more sophisticated discussion whether does it make sense to divide everything, a very small fund because the country is poor, on very, very small projects so that in every commune you build 200 meters literally of road, which is even unpaved, just with stone, with gravel? Or we should group somehow more strategically the investments, and then we started to raise flags. And this kind of project is not good, it's not going to last. the gravel road without the regularization of water flow nearby. And this is what happened 1 year later, actually, that the roads were destroyed by the winter. So everything was wasted. And now they have a much sophisticated discussion about the policy. And this is very real. So in this sense, we, in a way, contributed, I mean, the small project and the local partners to improving the level of the discussion in Moldova about this. And if I may, I'm addressing also the question of Gudrun, which was put in the Q&A in written form, and it's about Romania, where our project in Romania led to some action by prosecutors or to cases in court, especially in these companies, the clientelistic companies, relation with the local government, what I refer to. Well, the honest question is maybe, but we don't know, because we've been analyzing these things for so many years, and it's what we do is basically policy analysis with data which is basically open. So we don't work with secret information, and we don't produce evidence to hold in court like prosecutors. What we do is we group a vast amount of public information in a digestible form, and what we do is to raise flags in areas of vulnerability. So when you say, look, this thing is repeating over and over again, that a company which was incorporated last year now is winning all the contracts in a certain region, right? This is a red flag. If a prosecutor wants to build a case, they should go there and build do their own work, collect evidence to hold in court, which is not what we do. But there is a statistical correlation that the flags that we raised, we have a lot of cases in those areas in Romania. As you know, in the last 10 years, we had quite a vibrant anti-corruption drive for good and for worse. I mean, with a lot of successes and many failures as well. If I'm looking at coincidences, yes, you can say that some of the work that we've done put things on the agenda and made people more attentive to some areas of high vulnerability of capture. And the judiciary, yes, they did action on them, but I don't think they copy-pasted from our reports as an evidence in court.
But our efforts are to actually put all these allegedly complicated schemes into simple words that are easily understandable for someone who's not part of that sector, like a prosecutor or a judge. And we do have a lot of judges and prosecutors present at our discussions, even if they are just listening. So we'll take.
Laura, if I can,
yes, please,
just adding something to what Sorin said on the two questions about the, I'll say, practical results of research. When I look at the data for making the analysis, especially this data in the public procurement platform, web-based platform, I found a small Bulgarian municipality which was red flagged by the bioconcentration index. So there were 3 companies winning most of the tenders of this municipality. And even these companies are not formally or legally related by an accident. Actually, I know that 2 of these companies are at least suspected to be related to one of the Bulgarian organized crime groups, and this means that they are not 2 companies, but a single one, because they're controlled by a single guy behind them. And okay, I don't know whether something will happen with this data, but if not only a prosecutor but probably a journalist found this data in our platform and publish an article about this, this will make some practical results also. And this is why we do it, because this platform is not only for experts, it's also for general public, it's also for people in the local parliaments why not these people in this small municipality looking at this data, asking some questions to the mayor, and so on. And the second thing is that Ruslan mentioned it in the very beginning of the event. When we do the 8 so-called MACP studies of 8 public institutions of the anti-corruption policy implementation in 8 public institutions in our countries, at least 4 of them said that they will use these results for practically improving, or at least trying to improving their internal institutional measures and policies for anti-corruption. So this is also a kind of practical results that could come. It will be not visible, most probably. So the link to the research will be not visible, but it will happen. So as Sorin said several times, we try to showcase the red flags and the places of vulnerability, or points of vulnerability, and trends of vulnerability, and then we leave to the policymakers, control and sanctions institutions, law enforcement institutions to do their work. This is, I think, how the democratic institutions work, actually. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Todor. In another research that we've done, we've traced companies that actually implement projects financed by EU money. And what we found is that the same patterns of intercorrelations between political patronage and the business sector is reflected also in the use of EU money. Now, we cannot prove that that research was in any way linked with the Olaf investigations in some of these cases, but you know, the more data you have and the more data that is being presented publicly in a comprehensible manner, I think the more, the higher the likelihood of having proper investigations. We have 4 more minutes, but I would like to pass the floor to Gudrun to see whether we answered in the entirety her question. And then to Valentina Dimulescu, she also had a very interesting conversation with Ruslan on the chat, and I think it would be a pity if the rest of the participants wouldn't be able to see that. So please keep it very brief. First Gudrun and then Valentina. Gudrun, if you can unmute. Gudrun, can you hear us? Okay, then in the interest of time, let's move to Valentina. Valentina, can you hear us? Can you unmute yourself?
Hello, hello.
Hello.
Nice to see you all again.
Nice to see you.
So yeah, I just had a comment and a short question. My comment referred to the fact that, as far as I've seen lately, a major problem, at least in Romania, I cannot speak for Bulgaria, is that contracting authorities in some local counties, at least, I cannot even imagine at the commune level, they just do not have the administrative capacity to write the terms of reference. So they just don't know, in some sectors, of course, they just don't know how to write a good terms of reference, and this in turn leads to multiple questions from the companies that apply, misunderstandings and delays and so on and so forth. And from this point of view, my question would have been, so what is the level of economic underdevelopment in these areas, and the lack and the underdevelopment of administrative capacities of the state authorities in leading to some kind of unintentional capture at the local level? So economic companies at European level just do not have the opportunity to come into the local markets. especially at county and local level. So what does economic and administrative capacity under development, what role does it play in this research? Thank you.
Thank you, Valentina. My 2 cents is that we're looking at big money, and big money usually don't stand with small municipalities of small communes, and there I suspect probably the impact of underdevelopment is lower than of lack of integrity. But I'll pass it to Ruslan, because you two have had a very interesting conversation on this point. Ruslan.
Thank you, Anna. Thanks, Valentina, and thanks everyone for these great presentations, actually. And I just wanted also to use it as a kind of a closing remarks. I think we have to err on the side of caution here, because it's been too often that this argument has been used. But the fact of life is that we have, all the there are differences in capacity all across the EU, but then there are so many instruments that you could build capacity, and of course there are so many different ways to do that. And at the same time, we've seen very specific terms of reference at the local level that have favored one or another bidder. And of course, we've seen even cases where bidders have prepared the terms of reference. And that, in that respect, I think the instrument that SceMaps proposed is a very balanced one, because it also enshrines in itself the possibility of doing a capacity audit of the organizations within that do public procurement. So I think that's what the multi-purpose capability of this instrument that Todor mentioned about. But I agree with Soren that we need to try to explain it better. So try to go further, in terms of segmenting this. And again, I think we need to work both at the policy level. So what our findings mean for what the EU could do, what different EU institutions, what different national institutions can do, and also we need to look at the more and more at the local level that will have a lot of resources to manage. But all these need to come together, and I think this tool that we've proposed in SceMaps makes this good sense. That allows us to see what are the failings on policy level, so on policies, but also what are the failings of capacity. So I think we need to look forward and develop all these different levels and issues once at a time. And I think right now it's the time to also look and work with both DG Home and the European Parliament to develop these capabilities, as you say. But I think it would be better if we focus on vulnerabilities, and we try to work out on these vulnerabilities. They exist everywhere in Europe, and we need to be working on that so that we could, of course, uphold, as Ramon Strugariu said, the most cherished European value, which is justice across the Union, of course, anti-corruption. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ruslan. And on this note, unless we have interventions from anyone else from our panelists, I propose to conclude our meeting today. We managed to stay on time, and I think we managed to have very in-depth discussions, and I look forward to future events that bring us around the table to discuss how we can scale our efforts up to EU level, and why not to non-EU countries that are in the neighborhood. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.